Hello, Noble Knitter, it's Nancy Queen, and if you've been afraid to knit on circular needles, I've got a great project for you. It's these really cute wrist warmers. It's a one skein project, knitted flat, and then seamed on the side. So let's dive right in. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click the bell to get notified every time I post. For this project, I'm using one skein of Knit Picks Felice worsted yarn, a pair of size 8 straight knitting needles. You can use a 9 or 10 inch, a finishing needle, and a pair of small scissors. I'll provide links to all of these materials in the description below, as well as a link to the free pattern for you to download. I'm going to start my project by leaving a long tail of about 2 feet and then making a slip knot. And now I'm going to use the long tail cast on. You can use whatever cast on you prefer, but there's a link right here if you'd like to learn this cast on. It's my favorite go-to cast on for pretty much every knitting project. Now I'm casting on 33 stitches. If you would like to make your wrist warmers wider or narrower, cast on a multiple of 2 stitches plus 1. So you want an uneven number. So if you want one a little smaller, go down to 31 or 29. A little wider, go up to 33 or 35. But these wrist warmers do stretch quite a bit, so this size will fit most people pretty well. So once I've cast on my 33 stitches, I go ahead and count the stitches to make sure I actually have 33 stitches on that needle. When I've finished casting on, I go ahead and trim that long tail so that I don't accidentally knit it. Now I'm going to leave this one a little longer than usual, about 12 to 18 inches, because I'm going to want to use that tail to sew the side seam of the bottom half of my wrist warmer. Now let's begin row 1. We're going to knit the first stitch, then bring the yarn to the front and purl the second stitch. Now I'm showing it to you in continental style, but I'll show you in just a moment how to do this in the American or throw method. So I'm just knitting one, purling one, and repeating that all the way across the row until I get to the last stitch, and I will knit the last stitch. So it starts and ends with a knit. Now for those of you that prefer the throw method or the American method, we're going to go into the stitch, wrap the yarn around, pull up the new stitch, and take the old one off. Then we're going to bring the yarn around to the front, go into the front of the stitch, wrap the yarn around, go back out of the stitch, take the old stitch off. Okay, let's slow this down. So we're going to have the yarn in the back. We go into the back of the stitch, wrap the yarn around counterclockwise, pull up the new stitch, and then slide the old stitch off the needle. That's the knit. Now we need to bring the yarn between the two needles to the front, and then we go into the front of the stitch. This is a purl. Now we're going to wrap the yarn counterclockwise around that front needle, go back into the hole, picking up the new stitch, and then slide the old stitch off the needle. Now we'll move the yarn to the back to do our knit stitch, and we're just going to keep repeating these 2 stitches, knit one, purl one. So we go into the back of the stitch rather, wrap the yarn around the back needle counterclockwise, bring up the new stitch, and slide the old stitch off the needle. Row 2 is going to start with a purl. So I bring my yarn in front and I purl the first stitch. Then I bring the yarn to the back, knit the next stitch, yarn to the front, purl the next stitch, and I just keep repeating purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one, all the way across the row until I get to the last stitch, and I will purl that last stitch. Now I've slowed this down for you with the throw method. We're going to bring the yarn in the front to purl. Then go into the front of the stitch. Now we're going to wrap the yarn around the needle counterclockwise around that front needle. And we're going to go back in the hole and pull up a stitch and then slide the old stitch off the left hand needle. Now we're going to bring the yarn to the back to knit the next stitch. And we're going to go into the back of the stitch from front to back. Wrap the yarn around the needle counterclockwise and then bring up the new stitch and slide the old stitch off the needle. These wrist warmers are known as a 1x1 rib. So they're going to make columns of knits and purls, and I'll show you in more detail in a few minutes, but you can see already how the knits are lining on top of each other and the purls are lining up on top of each other. As you make progress on your wrist warmer, your 1x1 rib will look like this. It's very stretchy. And you can see the knits on the outside, and if you open it up, you'll see the purls when you stretch it. And then if you were to reverse it, see, I'm going to open it, there's my purls in there. But if you look at it on the other side, you're looking at the knits from the other side that were purls. So it's just reversed, but it looks identical on both the front and the back. You're going to continue your mitt until it measures 7 inches from the beginning, and you measure that by going just under the needle. You're not going to measure the needle or the stitches on the needle. When your project has measured 7 inches, it's time to bind off. It doesn't matter on this project whether you bind off on a row 1 or a row 2, but we're going to bind off in the established pattern. So we're going to be doing the purls and knits, or the knits and purls as they come. So for this one, I'm ending on row 2, so I start with a purl. We're just going to be adding one more step to this, and then I'm going to do the next stitch, which is a knit, and now I'm going to take the first stitch up and over and off the needle. Now I've bound off one stitch. Now I'm going to purl the next stitch and take that first stitch up and off the needle. I'm going to knit this next stitch and then take the first stitch up and off the needle. So the stitches are coming off the needle, but I'm working in the established pattern. So it gives it a really nice professional finished edge. You're going to keep going like this all the way across the row until you have just one stitch left on the needle. Now I'm down to my last stitch. And I have one stitch here on the needle. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to leave a long tail so that I can sew the side seam of the other end. And I'm going to just grab my finishing needle and then I'm going to slip that end through the loop that's from the last stitch. And I'll tighten that up. Now we're left with this really lovely panel of fabric. And we're going to be folding it in half lengthwise to create our fingerless mitts. And we're going to sew in about 2.5 inches at each end, and then we'll have about a 2-inch opening at the center. And you can keep trying on your mitts like this as you go to make sure that it's fitting just the way you want it to fit. And you can also decide, like I started with the pink, but I like the pink at the top. So I'm going to make the pink the top of my mitt and the purple the bottom of my mitt. But it's totally up to you how you want to do it. So I already sewed the one end because I realized that the purple and blue are too difficult to see on camera. So that one has been sewn about 2.5 inches. Now I'm going to thread the other tail and I'm going to join that to the other side. So I just come up from the end stitch and I'm just going to catch the first stitch, and there's a little bar, there's 2 bars in between each stitch if you kind of dig down in there. And I'm just going to pick up 2 bars and go back and forth from one side to the other, picking up 2 bars at a time. And see, when you pull it, you cannot even see that there's a seam there. It's beautiful. It's totally seamless. So pick up 2 bars, then go to the other side, pick up 2 bars, and just continue this way until your panel measures, your seam measures 2.5 inches. And like I said, go ahead and try it on to see if it fits the way you want. I even bring in the other mitt to line them up to make sure that the seams are the same length and the opening is the same. Now when I have my seam exactly the length I want it, I take my needle and my tail to the inside of the knitting. And now I turn it inside out so I can finish it up the way I'd like. So I pull through and I leave a loop, and then I bring the needle through the loop. And then using the seam that I created, I just weave down into the knitting so that it's not going to show on the outside. I come back the other direction and I'm done with that seam. Now I cut it close to the work and turn it back to the right side. Don't forget to download the free pattern, and I will see you in the next video.